The fork scraped across the plate like nails on a chalkboard. I'd been listening to that sound for 20 minutes now, sitting at the far end of Nora's dining table while everyone else talked around me like I wasn't there. Christmas dinner, the kind of gathering that's supposed to mean something. I'd driven 14 hours to get here, straight from Montana where I'd spent 3 weeks filming interviews with families who'd lost everything in the recent wildfires. My back ached from sleeping in motels with beds that sagged in the middle. My fingers still smelled like camera equipment and diesel from the generator trucks. I hadn't shaved in 4 days. Nobody asked about the trip. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. Ruby sat across from me, scrolling through her phone between bites of turkey. Her husband Tyler dominated the conversation at the other end, talking about some real estate deal he'd closed. Loud voice, big gestures, the kind of guy who needs everyone to know he's winning. Mitchell, Nora's husband, nodded along like Tyler was revealing the secrets of the universe. Every few minutes he'd glance at his watch. Important man, places to be, and Nora, my daughter. She'd opened the door earlier without a hug, just a quick look up and down that told me everything I needed to know about what she thought of my wrinkled shirt and road-worn jeans. So the commission alone was almost $15,000, Tyler said, stabbing at his mashed potatoes. I told the seller, you want premium buyers, you need premium staging. Smart, Mitchell said. That's the difference between amateurs and professionals. I took a sip of water. The ice had long since melted. Ruby's 2 kids were in the living room, faces buried in tablets. I'd brought them presents. They'd opened them without looking up, muttered thanks that might have been directed at me or at the Wi-Fi signal. This was my family. I'd spent 35 years raising these people, paid for colleges, co-signed loans, showed up for every birthday, every crisis, every 2 a.m. phone call when things went wrong and they needed someone to fix it. And here I was, invisible. I cleared my throat. I was thinking, Dad, can you pass the rolls? Ruby didn't look up from her phone. I passed the basket. Tyler launched into another story, something about a contractor who didn't understand proper subflooring. Mitchell laughed at all the right moments. The documentary I'd been filming in Montana was about people who'd rebuilt their lives from ash. Literal ash. I'd interviewed a woman who'd lost her house, her husband's workshop, and her daughter's entire childhood photo collection. She'd stood in the blackened foundation and told me, through tears, that she was grateful just to be breathing. These people sitting around this table didn't know what gratitude looked like. I tried again. I wanted to share something about the project. Nobody's working right now, Dad, Nora said, not even glancing my way. It's Christmas. Right, sorry. But Tyler kept talking about work. Mitchell kept nodding. Ruby kept scrolling. The rules, apparently, didn't apply to everyone equally. I looked down at my plate. The turkey was dry. The stuffing tasted like it came from a box. Everything about this dinner felt rehearsed and hollow, like they were performing the idea of family without actually engaging in it. Evelyn would have hated this. My wife had passed 4 years ago, and not a day went by that I didn't miss her. She'd been the glue, the translator, the one who could look at me across a room and know exactly what I was thinking. She'd warned me toward the end that the kids were pulling away, that they saw me as a resource rather than a person. I hadn't wanted to believe her. More wine? Nora stood, already reaching for Mitchell's glass. Please, he said. She walked past me without asking. The conversation shifted to vacation plans. Tyler and Ruby were thinking about Cancun. Mitchell wanted to try Aspen again. Nora mentioned some resort in Arizona that had a spa and a golf course. Nobody asked where I'd been. Nobody asked where I was going next. I'd spent the last 3 decades telling other people's stories, traveling to places where life was raw and real. Hurricanes, floods, political upheaval, small towns where the factory closed and everyone had to figure out what came next. I'd learned to read people, to see past what they said and understand what they meant. And sitting at this table, I could read every single person clearly. They didn't want me here. I wasn't part of their world anymore. I was the old man who showed up smelling like motel soap and road dust, who interrupted their polished conversations with stories about places they'd never visit and people they'd never meet. I was an inconvenience. The realization settled over me like cold water. Tyler laughed at something Mitchell said. Ruby finally put down her phone to join in. Nora smiled, refilling wine glasses, playing the perfect hostess for everyone except me. I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor. I'd like to make a toast, I said. The conversation stopped. 4 faces turned toward me, their expressions shifting between irritation and confusion. I picked up my water glass. I just want to say, Dad. Nora's voice cut through the room like a blade. Sit down. I just wanted to... Shut up, Dad. She set the wine bottle down hard enough that it rattled against the table. Nobody cares for you. The silence that followed was absolute. Ruby looked down at her plate. Tyler suddenly found something fascinating about his napkin. Mitchell cleared his throat but said nothing, and Nora just stared at me, her face tight with irritation, like I was a stranger who'd wandered into her house uninvited. I stood there for 5 seconds, maybe 10, long enough for someone to say something, to take it back, to laugh it off as a bad joke. Nobody spoke. I set my water glass down carefully, reached into my pocket, and pulled out my keys. Well, I said quietly, we'll see. I walked through the dining room, past the living room where my grandchildren didn't look up from their screens, past the entryway with its perfectly arranged family photos that somehow never included me, and out the front door into the December cold. The door clicked shut behind me. My truck was parked at the curb, covered in a thin layer of frost. I climbed in, started the engine, and sat there while the heat kicked on. The house looked warm from out here, golden light spilling from the windows, the silhouette of people moving inside, returning to their dinner, their conversation, their lives. I pulled out my phone. 17 messages from the last few months. Requests for money, questions about my schedule, reminders about obligations, not a single one asking how I was doing. I held the power button until the screen went dark. Then I put the truck in drive and headed west, away from Denver, away from my daughter's house, away from the family that had just made it crystal clear where I stood. The highway was empty, the sky was dark. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt something close to clarity. They'd mistaken quiet for weak. That was their first mistake. The road stretched out like a black ribbon under my headlights. I drove west through the night, through small towns where Christmas lights blinked in windows and past gas stations lit up like small islands in the darkness. I didn't have a destination. Didn't need one. For 35 years, I'd built my life around other people's needs. Evelyn's dreams, the kids' schedules, clients' deadlines. I'd shaped myself into whatever space was left over, and somewhere along the way, that space had shrunk to nothing. The heater rattled. The truck needed new belts. Probably new brake pads, too. I'd been meaning to take care of it for months, but there'd always been something more urgent. Someone else's crisis, someone else's priority, not anymore. I crossed into the mountains around midnight. The elevation made my ears pop. Snow lined the roadside, piled up where the plows had pushed it. I'd driven this route 100 times over the years, heading to assignment locations scattered across Colorado and Wyoming. There was a town about 2 hours west, a small place called Redemption Falls. I had been there 5 years earlier while filming a documentary about a mining company that had deserted the area. The town had declined slowly since then, but it was still hanging on, just barely. I knew a motel there. Clean enough. Quiet. The kind of place where nobody asked questions. My phone sat in the cup holder, still dark. I imagined the messages piling up, the missed calls, the angry texts demanding to know where I'd gone, why I'd left, what I thought I was doing. Let them wonder. The town appeared around 2 a.m., one stoplight, a closed diner, a gas station with a single pump that still worked. The motel sat at the edge of town, a squat building with peeling paint, and a neon vacancy sign that buzzed like a trapped wasp. I parked and went inside. The clerk was an older woman reading a paperback behind bulletproof glass. She looked up when I approached. Need a room? Week to start, I said. Maybe longer. She slid a registration card through the slot. I filled it out with cash up front. She didn't ask for ID, didn't ask why I was here. Room 12, ground floor, a bed that sagged in the middle, a TV that got 3 channels, and a bathroom where the shower groaned when you turned it on. Perfect. I dropped my bag on the bed and stood there in the dim light, listening to the silence. This was the first moment in decades that belonged entirely to me. I sat down on the edge of the bed and finally turned my phone back on. The screen lit up with notifications. 43 messages, 17 missed calls. I read them in order. Ruby first. Dad, where did you go? Then, Dad, seriously, this isn't funny. Then, you're being ridiculous. Tyler chimed in. Your daughter is upset. You need to apologize. Mitchell, this behavior is unacceptable. Call Nora immediately. And Nora. A dozen messages from Nora, starting with confusion, moving to irritation, landing on fury. You embarrassed me in front of my family. Everyone is asking what's wrong with you. I don't know why you're acting like this. You're being selfish and childish. Not one apology, not one acknowledgement of what she'd said. I set the phone down and pulled out my laptop. Years of documentary work had taught me how to organize chaos into narrative, how to take scattered pieces and build them into something coherent. I opened a new document and started typing. Not a story, a record, every interaction, every dismissed conversation, every time I'd been treated like background furniture in my own family's life. The time Ruby called at 3 a.m. demanding I co-sign a loan, then didn't speak to me for 3 months when I asked her to wait a week. The time Nora introduced me to her friends as just my father, like it was an apology. The time Tyler borrowed my truck and returned it with an empty tank and a dent he never mentioned. The time Mitchell asked for financial advice, then told everyone I didn't know what I was talking about when I suggested he slow down on his expansion plans. The time both kids forgot my birthday but expected me to remember every single milestone for their children. I typed for 2 hours, pulling up old emails and text messages, screenshots of conversations, voicemails I'd saved without knowing why. The pattern was obvious once I laid it out. I'd been their safety net, their ATM, their free labor, and the moment I'd tried to be anything more than that, I'd become a problem. Around 4 a.m, I stopped typing and stared at the screen. My entire career had been built on finding the truth in complicated situations, on asking the right questions, on documenting reality so clearly that denial became impossible. I'd just never turned that lens on my own life. Now I had. And the picture wasn't pretty. But clarity, even painful clarity, was better than self-deception. I closed the laptop and lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow, I'd start making calls, reaching out to contacts, people I'd worked with over the years who understood what I could do, not for work, for something else. I'd spent 35 years being the person everyone could depend on. Time to find out what happened when I depended on myself. Morning came with pale light through curtains that didn't quite close. I showered, changed into clean clothes, and walked to the diner across the street. It was open this time, just barely. 2 other customers. A waitress who looked like she'd been there since the mining company left. I ordered coffee and eggs. While I waited, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. Hundreds of names, from producers, cameramen, fixers, journalists, people I'd worked with on assignment who owed me favors or who owed me nothing but might help anyway. I started texting, not about work, about information. The first call went to a researcher named Paula, who specialized in financial backgrounds. I'd worked with her 3 years ago on a documentary about real estate speculation in Phoenix. Alden? She sounded surprised. It's been a while. I need a favor, I said. Quiet one. Go on? I need background on some people. Financial stuff, public records, business filings, anything that shows how they're really doing. Paula was quiet for a moment. This for a project? Personal. Another pause. Send me the names. I did. Mitchell and Tyler. Their businesses, their wives' businesses. Everything I could think of. Give me 3 days, she said. The food arrived. I ate while making more calls. Jerry, a tech guy who'd helped me recover footage from a corrupted hard drive in Louisiana, he owed me. I need phone records pulled, I said, and some digital footprints checked. Legal? Gray area. Jerry laughed. My specialty. Send me what you've got. I sent him Ruby and Nora's information. By the time I finished breakfast, I'd reached out to 6 people. All of them agreed to help, some because they owed me, some because they were curious, some because they just liked a good puzzle. I walked back to the motel and opened my laptop. The messages from my family had continued through the night. Ruby. Dad, you need to stop this. Tyler. We're worried about you. Mitchell. This is getting out of hand. Nora. I talked to some people and they're concerned about your mental state. That last one made me stop. Mental state. I read it again. Then I opened a search window and typed in the phrases I'd heard them use over the last few months. Little comments, suggestions, concerns about my memory, questions about whether I was handling things okay. They'd been building a narrative. I called Paula back. Quick question, I said. Can you check if anyone's been making inquiries about me? Medical, financial, legal? What kind of inquiries? The kind that come before someone tries to declare you incompetent. She whistled softly. Family? Yeah. I'll dig. This is uglier than I thought. It gets worse the more you look. I hung up and sat back, staring at the screen. They weren't just dismissive, they were strategic. Somewhere in the last year, my children had decided I was becoming a problem. Too old, too unpredictable, too much of a wild card with my book royalties and documentary residuals coming in. They wanted control, and when I'd walked out on Christmas dinner, I'd disrupted their timeline. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Rourke?" A man's voice. Professional. "My name is Dennis Kohler. I'm an attorney representing your daughter Nora. She's asked me to reach out regarding some concerns about your well-being." I almost laughed. "What concerns?" "She's worried you may be experiencing some cognitive difficulties. She mentioned you left a family gathering abruptly and haven't been responding to attempts to reach you." I left because I wanted to. "Mr. Rourke, I understand this may be difficult to discuss, but your family has your best interests at heart. They're worried you might not be making sound decisions." "Tell my daughter," I said slowly, "that I've made documentaries about hurricane recovery, wildfire aftermath, and political corruption. I've interviewed governors and criminals. I've rebuilt hard drives and managed six-figure budgets. And I remember every single thing she said to me in the last 10 years. My mind is fine. My decisions are sound. And if she tries this again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person she really is." Silence on the other end. "I'll relay that message," Kohler said carefully. "You do that." I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. They'd actually tried it, hired a lawyer, started building a case, and they'd done it less than 24 hours after I'd left. I opened a new document and started writing down everything I remembered about our Christmas conversation. Every word, every tone, every detail. Then I wrote down everything I remembered from the last 5 years. Every request for money, every dismissive comment, every time they'd treated me like an inconvenience. Documentation, that's what I needed. Not for a lawsuit, not for revenge, for leverage. Because if they wanted to play this game, I'd play it better. I'd spent 3 decades learning how to expose the truth in situations where powerful people wanted it buried. I knew how to build a case, how to create a narrative that couldn't be denied, and I knew exactly where my children were vulnerable. The phone rang again. Ruby this time. I let it ring through to voicemail. She left a message. I played it back. "Dad, please, we're worried. This isn't like you. Just call us back and let us know you're okay. We love you." I deleted it. Love was a word they used when they wanted something. I'd spent years accepting that, believing it meant something, not anymore. 3 days later, Paula called back. "You sitting down?" she asked. "Go ahead." "Your son-in-law Mitchell is drowning. He's got 3 loans in default, 2 business lines of credit maxed out, and he just refinanced his house for the second time in 18 months. He's 6 weeks from collapse." "And Tyler?" "Clean on paper, but I found some interesting connections. He's been routing money through an LLC that doesn't show up on his main business filings. Either he's hiding assets, or he's doing something he doesn't want public." "What about Nora and Ruby?" Paula sighed. "Nora's real estate business is fine, but she's personally guaranteed some loans for Mitchell that she probably shouldn't have. If he goes down, she goes with him. Ruby's completely dependent on Tyler. No income of her own, no assets in her name. If he decides to walk, she's got nothing." I thanked her and hung up. Jerry called an hour later. "The digital stuff is interesting," he said. "Your daughter Nora's been emailing with that lawyer for 3 weeks. They've been building a file on you. Medical concerns, financial concerns, quotes from family members about your behavior." "What kind of quotes?" "The kind that sound reasonable individually but paint a picture when you put them together. They're setting up a competency challenge." "Can you send me everything?" "Already in your email. Encrypted folder. Password is your wife's maiden name." I opened the files. There it was. Emails between Nora and the attorney. Strategy discussions. Suggestions about how to approach me. Contingency plans if I resisted. They'd been planning this for months. The Christmas dinner hadn't been the trigger. It had been the opportunity. When I'd walked out, they'd accelerated their timeline, worried I was catching on. They were right. I printed everything and laid it out on the motel room desk. Then I started making a different kind of call. First, to my literary agent. "Alden, good to hear from you. How's the new book coming?" "On schedule," I said, "but I want to accelerate the publication timeline. Can we move it up 6 months?" "That's aggressive. Why the rush?" "Personal reasons. Can it be done?" He thought about it. "If you can deliver the manuscript 2 months early, I can push the publisher. They've been eager anyway. Your last book did well. You'll have it in 6 weeks." Next, I called my financial advisor. "I need everything consolidated and protected," I said. "Trusts, estate planning. Lock it down so nobody can challenge it." Are you okay? Fine, just being careful. I'll send you paperwork. Then I made the call I'd been avoiding. Directory Assistance, Montana Wildfire Recovery Foundation. I'd like to speak with Sandra Milhouse. Sandra was the woman I'd interviewed in the burned foundation of her house, the one who'd lost everything and still found gratitude. This is Sandra. Ms. Milhouse, my name is Alden Rourke. I interviewed you 3 weeks ago for a documentary. I remember. You were kind. I have a question. When you were rebuilding, when people tried to take advantage of the situation, how did you handle it? She was quiet for a moment. I documented everything, took pictures, recorded conversations, and when they pushed, I pushed back harder, not with anger, with truth. Did it work? I'm still here, she said. They're not. We talked for 20 minutes. She told me about contractors who tried to overcharge, insurance companies that denied claims, family members who disappeared when things got hard, and she told me how she'd won every single fight. The thing people don't understand, she said, is that the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be undeniable. After I hung up, I sat for a long time staring at the documents spread across the desk. My children thought they were dealing with a confused old man, someone they could manipulate, someone who'd roll over. They'd forgotten who I was. I'd built a career on finding the truth in places where people tried to hide it. I'd documented disasters, exposed corruption, told stories that powerful people didn't want told, and I'd done it all calmly, methodically, without ever raising my voice. That's what I'd do now. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not the book I'd been working on. Something new, a timeline, a narrative, a story. The story of how a family decided their father was worth more controlled than free. I wrote for 6 hours straight. When I finished, I had something that read like one of my documentaries. Clear, factual, devastating. I saved it to an encrypted drive. Then I made one more call. An old friend from my early days in television. Marcus ran a small production company now. We'd stayed in touch over the years. I need to rent some equipment, I said. What kind? Lights, audio, cameras, the works. You shooting something? Yeah, I said. A reckoning. The equipment arrived 2 days later. Marcus drove it down himself, curious enough to make the trip. We unloaded everything into the motel room. Lights, stands, a small audio mixer, 2 cameras. You gonna tell me what this is about? Marcus asked. Family project, I said. He looked around the motel room. Hell of a production space. I'm not shooting here. I showed him the location I'd found. An abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. It had been used for equipment storage back when the mine was running. Now it was just empty space with good bones and lots of natural light. I need help setting up a scene, I said. Multi-camera, controlled lighting, audio that picks up everything. Marcus grinned. You're staging something. Yeah. Who's the audience? 4 people who need to see themselves clearly. He helped me load the equipment into the warehouse. We spent the afternoon setting up. Lights positioned to create depth and shadow, cameras hidden behind support beams, audio mics placed strategically around the space. When we finished, the warehouse looked empty, but it was actually the most controlled environment I'd ever built. This is either brilliant or insane, Marcus said. Both. He left at sunset. I stayed in the warehouse, testing everything. The lights responded to remote controls. The cameras fed to a laptop I'd positioned in a small office space overlooking the main floor. The audio was crisp. Perfect. I went back to the motel and checked my messages. The tone had shifted. Ruby. Dad, we're coming to find you. Mitchell. This has gone on long enough. Tyler, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Nora. I'm trying to help you. Why won't you let me help you? They were planning something. Good. I sent a single text to all of them. If you want to talk, I'll be at the old mining warehouse in Redemption Falls. Friday night, 8 p.m. Come alone or don't come at all. Then I turned off my phone. The next 3 days I spent preparing. I pulled every document, every email, every text message. I organized them chronologically and thematically. Financial manipulation, emotional dismissal, strategic planning to control my assets. I created presentations, slideshows, audio compilations, everything they'd said, everything they'd done, not edited to make them look bad, just edited to show the truth. I also spent time in the warehouse, programming the lighting sequences. I'd learned basic stagecraft during my documentary years, how to use light and shadow to create mood, how to control what people saw and when they saw it. This wasn't going to be a confrontation, it was going to be a show. Friday arrived cold and clear. I got to the warehouse at 6 p.m. and ran through everything one more time. Lights working, cameras recording, audio feeding to the laptop. At 7:45, headlights appeared in the parking lot. 2 cars, they'd come together. I watched from the office window as they climbed out. Nora and Mitchell from the first car, Ruby and Tyler from the second. They stood in the parking lot, talking, planning, probably discussing how to handle me. They approached the warehouse door. I'd left it unlocked. They pushed inside. The space was dark except for a single spotlight illuminating the center of the floor. "Dad?" Nora's voice echoed. I didn't answer. They moved deeper into the warehouse, clustered together, looking around nervously. I pressed a button on the laptop. The first set of lights came up. Not bright, just enough to show the space, to reveal the emptiness, to make them feel exposed. "What is this?" Tyler asked. Another button. Speakers around the warehouse came to life, their own voices. Nora, "Shut up, Dad. Nobody cares for you." Ruby, "You're being ridiculous." Mitchell, "This behavior is unacceptable." Tyler, "Your daughter is upset. You need to apologize." The audio compilation ran for 2 minutes. Every dismissive comment, every demand, every insult. They stood frozen, listening to themselves. When it ended, I hit another control. The projectors came to life. Images on the warehouse walls, text messages, emails, the conversation with the lawyer about declaring me incompetent. "Dad, stop this." Nora's voice cracked. "Where are you?" Ruby shouted. I let them stand there for another minute, surrounded by their own words, their own plans, their own ugliness. Then I stepped out of the office and walked to the railing overlooking the main floor. They all turned, looking up. "You wanted to talk?" I said. "So let's talk." The light shifted. I'd programmed it to follow me as I descended the metal stairs from the office to the main floor. Their faces tracked me, 4 sets of eyes trying to process what they were seeing. I reached the bottom and walked slowly toward the center of the warehouse. The spotlight moved with me. "What is this?" Mitchell demanded. He tried to sound authoritative, but his voice wavered. "This," I said, stopping about 20 feet from them, "is what happens when you underestimate someone." "Dad, this is crazy." Nora took a step forward. "We're here because we care about you." I pressed another button on the remote in my pocket. A new image appeared on the wall behind them, the email chain between Nora and her lawyer. The subject line clear: Competency Evaluation Strategy. She went pale. "You hired an attorney 3 weeks before Christmas," I said. "You built a case questioning my mental fitness. You collected statements from family members about my supposedly declining condition, and then you waited for an opportunity to trigger it." "It wasn't like that," Ruby said. "No?" Another button, another projection, financial records showing Mitchell's debts, his failed loans, the timeline that showed he'd started pushing for control of my assets right when his business started collapsing. "You needed money," I said to Mitchell, "and you convinced my daughter that the best way to get it was to declare me incompetent and take control of my finances." "That's not true," Mitchell said. "Then explain the emails." He couldn't. Tyler stepped forward, trying to draw attention. "Look, maybe we all got carried away, but we can work this out. We're family." I looked at him. "You're right. We are family. And that makes what you did worse." Another projection. Tyler's hidden LLC. The money moving through accounts that didn't show up on his main business filings. "What's that?" Ruby asked, staring at the screen. "Ask your husband." Tyler's face hardened. "You had no right to dig into my business. You had no right to plot against me, but here we are." The warehouse was silent except for the hum of the projectors. I walked closer to them, close enough to see their faces clearly, the fear, the anger, the realization that they'd lost control of the situation. "You all made the same mistake," I said quietly. "You assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak. Because I didn't fight back immediately, I wouldn't fight back at all. You forgot what I do for a living." "Dad, please," Nora's voice broke. "We can fix this." "No," I said. "You can't." I pulled out a folder I'd been holding. Inside were documents, legal papers, financial records. "I've restructured everything," I said. "The book royalties you were counting on? Protected in a trust you can't touch. The documentary residuals? Same thing. The house? Transferred to an entity that has nothing to do with any of you." Ruby made a small sound. "You're cutting us off?" Tyler asked. "No, I'm cutting you loose. There's a difference." Mitchell stepped forward. "You can't do this. We'll fight it." "With what? Your lawyer? The one whose emails I have?" "Go ahead. Take me to court. I'll bring every piece of evidence I've collected over the last 2 weeks. Every text message, every voicemail, every documented instance of manipulation and dismissal. I'll turn it into a case study of elder manipulation. I'll make it so public that every one of you becomes a cautionary tale." "You wouldn't," Nora whispered. "Try me." The lights shifted again. This time they illuminated different areas of the warehouse. In each corner, I'd set up a display, one for each of them. Nora's corner showed her real estate deals, the ones that had failed, the ones she'd hidden, the ones that proved she wasn't nearly as successful as she pretended to be. Mitchell's corner showed the debt timeline, the progression from successful businessman to desperate gambler taking bigger and bigger risks with other people's money. Ruby's corner showed her complete financial dependence, every loan co-signed, every bill paid, every safety net provided by someone else. Tyler's corner showed his hidden assets, the money he'd been moving, the deals he hadn't told his wife about. "Everyone gets to see who they really are," I said. They turned slowly, taking in their own displays, the evidence of their failures, their secrets, their vulnerabilities. "Why are you doing this?" Ruby asked. She was crying now. "Because you asked for it. Every time you dismissed me, every time you treated me like furniture, every time you forgot I'm not just your father, I'm a person." "So what now?" Tyler's voice was tight. "You've made your point. You've humiliated us. What do you want?" "I don't want anything from you. That's the point. For the first time in 35 years, I don't need anything from you. I don't need your approval. I don't need your attention. I don't need to be part of your lives." "You're our father," Nora said. "And you told me nobody cares for me. In front of your family, on Christmas. You said the quiet part out loud, and now you're upset that I believed you." Mitchell tried one more time. "Look, we all said things we didn't mean. This is getting out of hand." "No," I said. "This is finally getting honest." I walked back toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" Ruby called. "Somewhere you're not." "Dad, wait." Nora's voice was desperate now. "We're sorry. Okay? We're sorry. Just please don't do this." I stopped at the base of the stairs and turned back. "You're not sorry," I said. "You're scared. There's a difference. You're scared because you're realizing that you can't control me anymore, that you can't manipulate me, that the person you thought you could push around just pushed back. But sorry? No. If you were sorry, you would have said it on Christmas. You would have called back and apologized. You would have done something before you got caught." I started up the stairs. "We'll tell people about this," Tyler shouted. "We'll tell everyone what you did." I paused. "Go ahead. Tell them I exposed the truth about how you've been treating me. Tell them I defended myself. See how that works out for you." I reached the office and looked down at them one last time. They stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by their own ugliness projected on every wall. "Merry Christmas," I said. Then I turned off the lights. The warehouse plunged into darkness. I heard them stumbling, cursing, fumbling for their phones to use as flashlights. I collected my laptop and walked out the back exit. I drove back to the motel in silence. The warehouse was automated now. The lights would come back on in 20 minutes. The projections would loop for another hour. They'd have plenty of time to see everything, to understand exactly how much I knew. It wasn't over yet. The confrontation had been satisfying, but confrontation wasn't the goal. Consequence was. I'd learned something fundamental during my years documenting disasters. Exposure meant nothing if it didn't lead to change. You could show people the truth, you could document corruption, you could prove manipulation, but unless there were real consequences, nothing shifted. They needed to feel it. Back in the motel room, I opened my laptop and checked the recordings from the warehouse. The cameras had captured everything. Their faces when they saw the projections, their reactions when they realized how much evidence I had. The fear, the desperation, perfect. I edited the footage down to a 5-minute highlight reel. Nothing illegal, nothing private. Just their own words played back to them and their reactions. Then I started working on the real plan. The book I'd been writing was scheduled to release in 6 months. It was about resilience in disaster zones, about how people rebuilt when everything fell apart. My editor loved it. The publisher was pushing for a strong marketing campaign. I opened the manuscript and added a new chapter, a personal chapter, about what happens when the disaster is in your own family, when the people you've spent decades supporting decide you're more valuable controlled than free. I wrote it carefully. No names, no identifying details that would expose my children directly. But anyone who knew us would recognize the story, and anyone who didn't would still understand the warning. I sent it to my editor with a note. "New chapter. This is the heart of the book. Everything else builds to this." She called 30 minutes later. "Alden, this is powerful, but it's also personal. Are you sure you want to publish this? Completely sure. Your family might react badly. They already have. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, I'll work it into the structure. This changes the marketing angle entirely. We can position this as not just a book about external disasters, but about internal ones. Perfect. After I hung up, I made 3 more calls. First, to a journalist I'd worked with on a documentary about financial exploitation. She wrote for a major newspaper now. I've got a story for you, I said, about how families manipulate aging parents for financial gain. Not my story specifically, but patterns I've observed. Would you be interested? Always. Send me what you have. Second, to a producer I knew who specialized in human interest pieces for television. I'm working on something about family dynamics and control, I said. Could make a good segment, broad topic, but with some specific examples that would resonate. Send me a pitch. Third, to my financial advisor. I want to set up an educational foundation, I said, something focused on helping older people protect themselves from financial manipulation by family members. I'll fund it with a portion of my book royalties. That's a significant commitment. I know. The wheels were turning now, not just exposing my children, contextualizing them, making their behavior part of a larger conversation about how families treat their elders when money is involved. They'd become examples whether they liked it or not. My phone finally buzzed. A text from Nora. We need to talk, face to face, please. I didn't respond. Another text 5 minutes later, from Ruby this time. Dad, you made your point. Can we please just talk about this like adults? Still nothing from me. Then Tyler. This is insane. You're destroying your own family. And Mitchell. You're going to regret this. That last one made me smile. I was going to regret it? They'd already tried to have me declared incompetent, already hired a lawyer, already built a case, and now they were worried I'd regret defending myself. I turned off my phone and went for a walk. The town was quiet. Most of the buildings were dark. The mining company that had sustained this place was long gone, but the people who remained had adapted, found new ways to survive, new industries, new purposes. That's what I was doing, finding a new purpose. For 35 years, my purpose had been family, providing, supporting, being there, and they'd taken that and twisted it into obligation, expectation, entitlement. Now my purpose was clarity, showing people what I'd learned, warning others, making sure the truth was so undeniable that they couldn't spin it. I walked past the old mining office. The windows were boarded up, but I could still see the faded company logo. They'd operated here for 50 years before abandoning everything when the ore ran out. Left the town to figure out survival on its own. Not that different from what my kids had done. When I got back to the motel, there were 3 voicemails. I listened to all of them. Nora, crying, begging me to reconsider, saying she never meant what she said at Christmas, that it had been a stressful day, that she loved me. Ruby, angry, accusing me of manipulation, of turning a family disagreement into warfare, of acting like the victim when I was really the aggressor. Mitchell, calculated, offering a compromise, suggesting we sit down with mediators, framing it as the reasonable approach. I deleted all 3. Then I opened my laptop and started writing again. Not for the book this time, for the foundation website I was building, the one that would teach people how to recognize financial manipulation, how to protect themselves, how to document evidence and build cases. I wrote until 3 a.m. When I finally stopped, I had a comprehensive guide, step by step, everything I'd learned over the last 2 weeks, everything I wished I'd known years ago. I scheduled it to go live the same day my book published. Then I allowed myself to sleep. Tomorrow would be complicated. They'd start pushing back harder, threatening, making accusations, but I'd spent a career dealing with people who didn't want the truth exposed. I knew how to handle pressure, and I knew something they were just beginning to realize. I wasn't improvising anymore. I had a plan. Morning brought more messages. Dozens of them. The family group text chain I'd been ignoring had exploded overnight. I scrolled through them with my coffee. They'd spent hours trying to make sense of what happened, arguing with each other, blaming each other, trying to figure out their next move. The pattern was predictable. Mitchell wanted to threaten legal action. Tyler wanted to confront me directly. Ruby wanted to play the emotion card, and Nora was trying to manage all of them while maintaining some semblance of control. They were fracturing. Good. My phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local to Denver. I answered. Mr. Rourke, this is Janet Desmond. I'm a family therapist. Your daughter Nora reached out to me. She's very concerned about the conflict in your family and wondered if you'd be willing to participate in mediated sessions. Did she tell you why there's conflict? She mentioned some misunderstandings at a holiday gathering. Misunderstandings, that's one way to describe it. Janet paused. I understand emotions are running high, but mediation could help everyone communicate more effectively. Ms. Desmond, do you know what I do for a living? I don't believe Nora mentioned it. I'm a documentary producer. I specialize in finding the truth in complicated situations. And what I've found in this situation is that my children have been systematically manipulating me for years, attempted to have me declared incompetent so they could control my assets, and are now trying to frame my defense as a mental health crisis. Does that sound like a misunderstanding to you? Silence. I see, she said finally. I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm not interested in mediation with people who've already demonstrated they can't be trusted. I hung up. The therapist call was strategic. They were building a new narrative. The concerned children trying desperately to help their troubled father who refuses treatment. Classic manipulation. I'd seen it in documentaries about corporate whistleblowers, about people who spoke up against powerful families. The playbook was always the same: discredit, isolate, frame resistance as instability. But I'd also documented what happened when people refused to play along. They won. Not always immediately, not always cleanly, but eventually the truth had a way of asserting itself. I opened my email. The journalist I'd contacted had responded, "Love this story, Angle. Elder financial manipulation is underreported. Can you put me in touch with some people who've experienced it? I'll keep your situation confidential unless you want to go on record." I sent her contacts. 3 people I'd interviewed over the years who'd fought off family members trying to control their estates, all willing to talk. The producer responded too. This could be a great segment. We're thinking about a series on family dynamics and financial control. Would you be willing to consult? Background only, nothing on camera unless you choose otherwise. I agreed. The pieces were moving into place. Not to destroy my children, to make sure their behavior had context, to ensure that if they tried to paint me as unstable, there'd be a counter-narrative ready. One backed by experts, by data, by other people's stories. Around noon, my literary agent called. "Your editor loves the new chapter. She wants to move the publication date up even further. There's momentum building. Early readers are calling it your most powerful work yet." Good. "Alden, are you okay? This book is getting personal in ways your previous work hasn't." "I'm fine. Better than I've been in years, actually." "Your family's going to read this. I'm counting on it." After lunch, I drove to the library in the next town over. Small place, but it had internet and privacy. I logged into the social media accounts I barely used and started documenting. Not the specific details of my situation, just observations about how families treat their elders, questions about what happens when care becomes control, links to resources about financial protection. Each post was measured, thoughtful, the kind of thing someone concerned about societal issues would share, but anyone who knew me would recognize the subtext. By evening, I had a dozen responses from people sharing their own stories. Parents who'd been sidelined, grandparents who'd been manipulated, people who'd watched their families turn on them the moment they became inconvenient. A community was forming. I drove back to the motel and found a car in the parking lot. Tyler's truck. He was waiting by my door. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't." I moved past him to unlock the door. He grabbed my arm. "I'm not asking." I looked down at his hand, then up at his face. "You've got 3 seconds to let go." He squeezed harder, trying to intimidate me. 1. You think you're tough because you made some documentary films? 2. This is real life. You can't just walk away from family. 3. I pulled my arm free using a technique I'd learned from a security consultant while working on a documentary about embassy protection. Nothing harsh, just controlled and effective. Tyler stumbled back, surprised. "I've worked in disaster zones," I said calmly. "I've been in rooms with warlords and corrupt politicians. I've navigated situations where saying the wrong thing could get people taken away. You grabbing my arm? That's not intimidating. That's just sad." His face reddened. "You're making a mistake." "No, you made the mistake. You all did. And now you're dealing with the consequences. Ruby's falling apart. You know that? Your daughter is crying every night because her father abandoned her." "I didn't abandon anyone. I removed myself from a toxic situation." "That's not how she sees it. Then she needs to look harder." Tyler took a step closer. "You release whatever you're planning to release, you're going to destroy this family." "This family destroyed itself. I'm just documenting it." "We can sue you." "For what? Telling the truth? Go ahead. Discovery in a lawsuit would be fascinating. All those emails you think are private, all those financial records, they'd become public record. Is that really what you want? He didn't have an answer for that. Go home, Tyler. Tell Ruby I hope she finds someone who deserves her dependency. Tell Nora and Mitchell their lawyer's strategy won't work. And tell yourself that threatening me was the dumbest thing you could have done. I went inside and locked the door. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a full minute before finally getting in his truck and driving away. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the satisfaction of standing my ground. I sat down at the laptop and added a note to my documentation file. Tyler attempted physical intimidation. Failed. Threatened legal action. Also failed. Then I made one more call. To Marcus. Remember that equipment we set up? I need to expand it. How much? Double. Maybe triple. I'm going to need a bigger stage. The next phase took 2 weeks to prepare. I rented a different space, bigger this time. An old community center that had been shut down when the town's population dropped. It had a main hall with a stage, multiple rooms branching off, and good acoustics. Perfect for what I had planned. Marcus helped me transform it. We set up cameras in every room, microphones in strategic locations, lighting that could be controlled remotely, projectors positioned to display content on walls throughout the building. You building a haunted house or a documentary? Marcus asked. Both. I spent the days programming sequences. Different rooms would activate different content. Financial records in one space, email chains in another, audio compilations in a third. Each room told a story, each story connected to the larger narrative. And in the center, the main hall. That's where everything would converge. The work was meticulous. I tested every light cue, every audio transition, every projection angle. This wasn't just about exposing them. It was about making the exposure undeniable, visceral, impossible to dismiss or rationalize away. I created a master timeline. The presentation would flow like a 3-act structure. Introduction, evidence, conclusion, each segment building on the last. Each revelation hitting harder than the one before. Marcus watched me work with a mixture of admiration and concern. You know this is going to blow up their lives, he said one afternoon. They already tried to blow up mine. Yeah, but you're doing it publicly, permanently. Good, let it be permanent. He nodded slowly. Just making sure you know what you're doing. I've never been more sure of anything. I spent evenings refining the content, cutting unnecessary material, strengthening weak points, making sure every claim was backed by multiple sources of evidence. No gaps, no ambiguity, no room for them to claim misunderstanding or misrepresentation. This was my career skill applied to my personal life. Investigation, documentation, narrative construction. I'd done it for disasters and corruption and human interest stories. Now I was doing it for myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent decades telling other people's stories of survival and resilience. Now I was living one. I sent invitations, not to my children, to everyone else, business partners, friends, extended family members, people from their professional circles, colleagues from my documentary work, journalists I'd collaborated with, producers who knew my reputation. The invitation was simple. Presentation on family, finance, and truth. Friday, 7 p.m. Community Center, Redemption Falls. I didn't explain further. Didn't need to. The rumors had already started spreading through their networks. My children had been talking, trying to control the narrative, telling people I'd become unstable, that I needed help, that I was making wild accusations. This would give them a chance to prove it. I also reached out to the journalist and the producer I'd been working with. If you want to see what elder manipulation looks like in real time, I said, be here Friday night. They both agreed to come. The journalist asked if she could bring a photographer. I said yes. The producer asked if she could record. I said absolutely. Documentation upon documentation, layers of verification. The week before the presentation, my phone exploded with messages from my children. They'd heard about the event. Someone had forwarded the invitation. They were panicking. Nora. Dad, what are you doing? Please don't do this. Mitchell. This is slander. We'll sue. Ruby. Why are you trying to hurt us? Tyler. You're insane. The messages came in waves, dozens per day, each one more desperate than the last. I responded to all of them with the same message. You're invited. Front row seats, be there or don't. Then I muted the conversation. I spent the final days preparing myself mentally, not for confrontation, I was past that, but for the moment when everything I'd built would either work or fail. I reviewed the content one last time, checked the equipment, ran through the entire presentation sequence twice to make sure the timing was perfect. Marcus arrived the day before to help with final setup. "This is either the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said, "or the craziest. It's both. You really think this will change anything? It already has. For me, at least." Friday arrived cold and clear. I got to the community center at 5 p.m. The sun was already setting, throwing long shadows across the empty parking lot. I went inside and started the final preparations. Lights tested, audio checked, projectors aligned, laptops positioned and ready. Everything was in place. I changed into clean clothes, simple, professional. The same kind of outfit I'd wear to a documentary screening or a professional conference. This was work. The most important work I'd ever done. People started arriving at 6:30. I watched from a back window as they filed in. Curious faces, confused expressions, people wondering what this mysterious presentation was about. I recognized most of them, colleagues from various projects, a few extended family members, business associates of my children who'd probably come out of curiosity or concern, and scattered throughout, the journalist and producer I'd invited. They positioned themselves strategically. Observer mode, professional distance, perfect. My children arrived at 6:50. I watched them pull into the parking lot. 2 cars. They sat there for several minutes, clearly arguing about whether to come inside. Finally, all 4 climbed out. They looked like they were walking to their own execution. In a way, they were. They entered through the main doors. I saw them scan the crowd, looking for allies, finding mostly strangers or people who'd heard rumors about what they'd done. They sat in the 4th row. Not front, not back. Trying to be inconspicuous. Too late for that. At 7 p.m. exactly, I walked onto the stage. The crowd quieted. 73 people by my count, more than I'd expected. The lights dimmed slightly, leaving a single spotlight on me. "Thank you for coming," I said. My voice was steady, calm. "I want to tell you a story." The screen behind me came to life. I started with context. My career as a documentary producer, the years spent traveling to disaster zones, conflict areas, forgotten communities, the work I'd done telling other people's stories of survival and resilience. I learned how to find truth in complicated situations, I said. How to document what people wanted to hide. How to build narratives that made denial impossible. I paused. I never thought I'd have to use those skills on my own family. The presentation shifted. I showed them my life. The decades spent raising my children, supporting them, being there for every crisis, every milestone, every need. Then I showed them what that support had become. Text messages demanding money, emails dismissing my concerns, voicemails treating me like an employee rather than a father. The pattern emerged clearly. Years of gradual erosion. Respect turning to expectation, turning to entitlement, turning to contempt. And then Christmas dinner. I narrated the evening, set the scene, described the atmosphere, the way I'd been ignored, dismissed, treated like furniture. And then I played the audio, the recording I'd made on my phone during dinner, background noise, clinking dishes, scattered conversation, and then my voice. I'd like to make a toast. Nora's response, clear and unmistakable. "Shut up, Dad. Nobody cares for you." The silence that followed on the recording was the same silence that filled the room now. I let it hang there for 10 full seconds. Then I continued. I explained what happened next. My departure, their response, the escalation from dismissal to active manipulation, and then I showed the emails. The screen filled with correspondence between Nora and her attorney. Subject lines, date stamps, content excerpts. Competency evaluation strategy. Financial control options. Timeline for action. I walked them through it methodically, the plan to have me declared incompetent, the strategy for gaining control of my assets, the timeline that showed they'd been working on this for months before Christmas. They didn't act impulsively, I said. They planned it. Next came the financial records. Mitchell's debts, the timeline of his business collapse, the correlation between his financial crisis and the increased pressure on me, Tyler's hidden accounts, the money moving through LLCs that didn't appear on his public business filings, Nora's guarantees on Mitchell's loans that put her own stability at risk, Ruby's complete financial dependence on everyone around her. Each revelation was backed by documents, bank statements, business filings, email trails, everything verified, everything real. Halfway through, Nora stood up. "This is slander," she shouted. Her voice cracked. "He's lying. This is all lies." I stopped the presentation. The spotlight shifted to include her. "Which part is a lie?" I asked calmly. The emails, I have the originals, the financial records. Those are public documents. The audio from Christmas, that's your voice. Which specific claim would you like to contest? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked around for support. Mitchell tried to pull her back down. She jerked away from him. You're making us look like monsters. I'm showing what happened. If that makes you look like monsters, maybe you should ask yourself why. Ruby was crying now. Tyler stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. I let Nora stand there for another 5 seconds, then I continued. The next section showed their response to my disappearance. The threatening messages, the attempts at manipulation, the escalating pressure, and then the warehouse confrontation. The footage I'd captured of them surrounded by their own words and actions. Their faces when they realized how much I knew. The fear, the anger, the desperate scrambling for excuses. I showed Tyler's attempt to physically intimidate me at the motel. The dashcam footage from my truck that captured him grabbing my arm. His threats, his failure. They thought they were dealing with a weak old man, I said. They forgot who I actually am. The final section was the most damning. I showed the ripple effects, how their manipulation had affected not just me, but everyone around them. Business partners Mitchell had deceived, clients Tyler had misled, friends Ruby had used, colleagues Nora had lied to, a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond me. This isn't about one bad day, I said. This is about character, about how people treat others when they think no one's watching, about what happens when entitlement replaces gratitude. The presentation reached its conclusion. 47 minutes total, every second planned, every revelation and timed for maximum impact. I'm not asking you to choose sides, I said to the audience. I'm asking you to recognize patterns, to understand that this happens more often than we admit, that families can become toxic, that love can be weaponized, that the people we trust most can be the ones who hurt us deepest. I looked directly at my children. All 4 of them were visible in the shifted lighting. Nora standing, tears running down her face. Mitchell slumped in his seat. Ruby sobbing. Tyler rigid with fury. And I'm asking you to remember something important, I said. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Patience doesn't mean permission. And just because someone doesn't fight back immediately doesn't mean they never will. I pressed the final button on my remote. The screen behind me filled with a single image. The family photo from Nora's entryway. The one that somehow never included me. They erased me from their lives long before I left, I said. I just made it official. The presentation ended. The lights came up fully. The room was absolutely silent. Then someone in the back started clapping. Slowly at first. Then others joined. Not everyone. Maybe half the room. But it was enough. My children sat frozen, exposed, surrounded by people who now knew exactly what they'd done. People started approaching them. Not to comfort, to question, to demand explanations. I walked off the stage and headed for the exit. Marcus was waiting by my truck. That was something, he said. My hands were finally shaking now that the adrenaline had drained. You okay? Yeah, I'm good. He helped me load the evidence drives. Call me if you need anything. I will. I drove away from the community center, watching people pour out behind me. My children would spend hours trying to defend the indefensible. Good. I checked into a motel 2 towns over, finally exhaling. It was done. The presentation, the exposure, the reckoning. I sent 3 emails, the footage to the journalist, the producer, and to my agent. The book is ready. Publish it. Then I turned my phone off. For 3 days, I stayed in the motel. On the 4th, I drove north, picking up new documentary assignments. Real stories, real people. The life I'd had before my children consumed everything. 2 weeks later, in a Washington diner, I finally turned my phone back on. The journalist's article had gone national. The producer's segment exploded online. My book was already being called essential. And the foundation I'd launched had 40,000 visitors. People learning how to protect themselves from family manipulation. Messages from my children waited. Nora, everyone thinks we're monsters. Are you happy? Mitchell, my business is finished. Ruby, I can't leave my house. Tyler, you destroyed everything. I felt nothing but certainty. They earned their consequences. Interviews followed. Radio, podcasts, TV. People didn't pity me. They recognized their own experiences. The story became larger than me. My children tried to defend themselves. Nora did an interview, but couldn't explain the emails or her own recorded voice. Mitchell issued statements. The younger 2 vanished from public view. 3 months later, while filming in Oregon, I answered a restricted call. "Dad?" Nora whispered. "I understand now. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know." "Okay. Are you ever coming back? To being a family?" I looked at the ocean, vast, indifferent. "No, I don't think I am." She cried. I didn't comfort her. "Goodbye, Nora." 6 months after the presentation, everything had unfolded exactly as planned. The book was a bestseller. The foundation was helping thousands. My children's reputations and careers had collapsed. The evidence trail kept resurfacing each time they tried to rebuild. At a film festival in California, after my new documentary screened, a young woman approached. "My grandmother watched your presentation," she said. "You saved her. She almost signed everything over to her kids. Now she's free." Something shifted in me. I stepped outside into the California night. The ocean murmured against the pier. A final message buzzed. "They're planning something. Thought you should know." I deleted it. Let them plan. Let them try. The truth was out, and they'd never cage it again. I walked toward the lights of the festival. The Pacific stretched endlessly ahead. My children were somewhere behind me, living with consequences. My life was somewhere in front of me. I smiled, and I didn't look back.